Professor Green. Welcome. It's so glad to have you today. Today, we're interviewing you for the Finnish in 4 office to give some guidance and tips about finding career plans and interests for new students. And how about you can start introducing yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm David Green. I'm a professor in the Applied Math Department, where I've teach a number of courses over the years, including linear algebra, calculus 3, and some courses in computational and mathematical biology.
Okay, so now let's start it. So our first question is, when you were in college, what helped you decide on a major or career path?
So I think I was one of the rare people who had actually a fair idea what I wanted to do. Even when I started college, I wanted to be a scientist from when I was very young. But at the same time, my interests sort of within that general area shifted quite a bit. When I was younger, I was quite interested in biology. As I started and got into high school, I became more interested in chemistry. And I was actually a chemistry major in undergraduate. I found chemistry fascinating. I was a little bit put off by the way that biology was taught at that time. This was quite a while ago, where there was very much of a focus on memorization and just sort of remembering a whole bunch of facts rather than learning kind of the rules and sort of concepts underlying the systems. And so that, I think, it was part of what led me to chemistry instead of biology. But at the same time, I was what I was doing then is very different than what I'm doing now. I still do work in chemistry in a sort of some sense, in that I do mathematical modeling of biochemical systems in my research. But when I was in undergraduate, I was very interested in the experimental side. I did research in the labs where I was at the bench learning how to do synthetic chemistry, synthetic organometallic chemistry, and that sort of thing. And it wasn't until the very, very end of my undergraduate that I discovered that there was a whole area of chemistry that involved building mathematical models and doing simulating them in computers and stuff. And that sort of discovery set me on the path to where I am now.
Ooh, that's actually so cool. I wouldn't imagine that you're a chemistry major if you didn't tell me. So here comes our second question. Was there ever a time you questioned yourself or why you were in college, and what did you do to resolve those feelings?
So I'm not sure that I ever really questioned out of why I was in or being in college. I had this goal of doing my undergraduate and then going to graduate school and so on. But there were certainly questions I had about sort of choosing the direction to take in college. I was interested in a lot of different things. I had interests in different areas of the sciences. As I said, I had interests in biology, I had interests in physics, I had interests in chemistry, and trying to decide which of those should be my focus. What wasn't always easy. Yeah, so I think that I, in many ways, just went with my gut feeling about what I was enjoying most, and let that guide me.
Okay, so yeah, so were there like any specific experience that you remember that having like a great meaning to you? Like for example, like jobs, internships that kind of like uh led you to want to explore something else than like college? Yeah.
So I would probably say the most impactful experience or as a person in my undergraduate career was one of my actually the professor who ended up being a research advisor to me for a number of years.
Oh.
And what happened is in my very first semester at undergrad, I didn't really know what to expect. The university I went to was similar size as Stony Brook, so a pretty big place with lots of faculty. Class sizes were large. So in all of my first year classes had kind of 200 or so students in them. It's very easy just to be kind of a number in the class. You don't really you walk into a big lecture hall and you sit down and you don't really interact with your instructors in any real way. And so at some point, I was taking organic chemistry, and at some point in the semester, I went down and asked the instructor just for some advice on where to get started. I knew I wanted to do some research. I wanted to get that experience, but I had absolutely no idea where to start. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know what the opportunities were or any of this. I had a little bit of an advantage in that I had older brother. I actually have several older brothers, but one of them is 7 years older than me, my oldest brother, and he had gone through college at the same place as I did. And so I knew that because he had done research when he was there, I knew that this was something that existed. Okay. But he had been in biology, he was a pre-med, and so his interests were different. I didn't know exactly who to talk to. I just had this vague idea that this is something that can be done. And so I went up to the front of the class at the end of one of the lectures. This wasn't a very easy thing for me. I was a very shy kid at the time. And just asked my instructor, how do you get started? I'm interested in doing research. I have no idea where to start. Who do I talk to? And his response, I think, made all the difference. He said, well, how about you just come to my office and we'll sort of talk about what you might do, right? And he basically offered me within sort of a few minutes of talking to him later a chance to work in his group.
Oh, right? Wow.
And I mean, obviously I wasn't getting paid or anything. It was just for me to get experience. But that, I think that made a big difference. I'm not sure how I would have responded to things if he hadn't been so welcoming and supportive. Right? As I said, I was a pretty shy kid at that time. And if I had been kind of shut down, I may well have struggled to sort of get up the courage to talk to more people.
So do you get to like work on like the same area as where your advisor, like your first Algo instructor mentor you into, or you just like change your idea or become like more interactive with people after that?
Uh, I think it just kind of adapted normally. Yeah.
So would you recommend like the same type of experience, or like what type of experience would you like recommend the student to go for most?
I think this is a little bit of a cliche. I think it's important, but I do think it's worth sort of really following to some degree to follow what your interests are. I think that for me, I was interested in science. I was interested in research. I knew that's kind of where I wanted to go, and so that was a good experience for me. Not everybody is going to be like that, right? Everybody has different experiences. I think that what was helpful in a more general sense about getting research experience as an undergraduate for me was that this is what I thought I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go into science and become a professor. But realistically, as a high school student, I had no concept what that meant. And as a early undergraduate, I had no idea what it really meant to be a professor, what the job entailed, what research was like. And so getting the chance to actually work in a academic research lab gave me insight to that. Right? I got to meet graduate students. I got to see what they were doing. I got to understand what graduate school was about. I got to know a number of professors better and to get a feeling a little bit more for what their job was like. And that allowed me to confirm that this is something that I wanted to do. And I think this is a common theme for many people when people are sort of contemplating what career they might want, what sort of job they might want to take after undergraduate. We always ask people, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do after you graduate? And in many ways, it's a really ridiculous question, because how do people have the experience? If you have no experience of what this is like, they don't know what they're going to like to do.
Yeah. That's
right?
so true.
And so anything that can give you insight into that, right? So I think one of the most beneficial things about internships, research experiences, anything like this, some of it is the skills that it gives you. Some of it is the actual sort of stuff you learn during that experience. But I think that one of the biggest benefits of those experiences are the insight that it gives you into what that job is like. If you're an intern working in some company, you're going there every day, or at least you're going there some days, and you're seeing people, you're seeing what people's day-to-day job is like. And for most people, that's eye-opening, right? That people might have an idea of what their parents' day-to-day life is like. And so if your interests are going into a same career path as your parents or other sort of people in your close to you in life, then maybe you'll have some sense. But if your parents work in a different area than what you think you want to do, you might have no real idea what that is like. And that getting that sort of feeling can be, that insight can be very important, because there's, again, most of my experiences in sort of the academic world and doing research, but there's for both myself and for other people, I know many colleagues, friends from graduate school, friends that I've known from conferences, who share the same general interests as me. We like working on the same kinds of problems. We like thinking on the same kinds of problems. But some people are very happy. My work mostly involves sitting in front of a computer all day long. Right? The work is done on a computer, so I write things on a computer. The only real break from that is when I'm one-on-one meeting with people, when I have meetings with that, right? But the most of the day-to-day work is sitting at a desk working at a computer. Some people like that. I'm a bit of an introvert. I'm often quite happy locking myself in my office and working on my own. Some people don't like that. I know a number of people who we're interested in the same scientific problems, but they like being in a lab. They like working with their hands. They like having that type of day-to-day experience. And that aspect of choosing a career is often, I think, underappreciated. What does the job actually entail every day? Is it something where you interact with lots of people? Is it something that mostly you do on your own? Is it something that involves a lot of just sitting at a desk? Or is it something that involves you sort of getting out and working more with people in the field or so on? Think about these things and what suits your sort of interests.
Yeah, so I think you give like a lot of tips. So I'm just going to make like a small conclusion that like, so there are like basically like 3 steps before you have like a vague idea of where you want to do. So you just follow your interests. That would be like the first step. And then the second step would be like getting more experience, insights, and maybe like gaining some skills when you are doing like internship or like doing like the volunteering in the research office. And then the third step kind of like getting to know some peers who work in the same areas and find out what's your comfort zone or like what's like your working habits, kind of like that. So I think this will be really helpful for the student. But I just want to like maybe ask about like how did you discover your first interest, like the vague idea or like the why would you know that you would want to be a scientist before you have like all that information?
That's a tough one. I think that it was my parents encouraged me to read a lot when I was a kid, and the sorts of things that I gravitated towards were learning about scientific things. When I was really young, I loved dinosaurs, and I read every book you could possibly imagine about dinosaurs. And I actually got in trouble when I was in, I think, 2nd grade, because my teacher told me the book I was reading was too complicated, and it couldn't be a 2nd grade book, because it was this massive, thick, heavy book that was like an encyclopedia of everything that was known about dinosaurs. And I think it's just how the way that my brain works. I like to sort of know a lot. I like to dig into things. And again, as I said, my interests changed over the years. I shifted from an interest in dinosaurs when I was like 6 or 7 to a real interest in marine biology when I was around 12 or 13. And I read a lot about that. Then, and that's sort of in high school, I kind of discovered chemistry and started getting interested in that. So for me, there was a common theme of an interest in science generally, but a shifting focus throughout my sort of life. And then, as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, towards the end of undergraduate, I kind of discovered that there's this whole field of computational science, and that opened a new thing. I think that the one thing I would emphasize is that I don't think that there's one right path for any individual. I think that I ended up doing the work I I'm doing. I ended up in an applied math department, doing computational work, teaching undergraduate math classes. And I'm very happy doing that. I enjoy it. I'm very, very pleased with where I am. I think if I had made a different decision in undergrad and I decided to focus more on biology, I think I would have been equally happy if I had ended up
or somewhere
molecular biology somewhere else and teaching undergraduate biology. I think for everybody, there's multiple paths to a happy, successful life. And so while the decisions you make in undergraduate about sort of what your major is and what you do afterwards, they are very impactful and they will shape your life in very important ways. But they're not always decisions that have a right or wrong answer. There's lots of times in life where you're faced with two choices, a decision you need to make, and neither of them is a right choice or a wrong choice. They're just different choices. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. It takes a bit of the stress off of making decisions if you're not sort of thinking too far ahead of which is the right thing for me to do. You can instead take this as what is the right thing for me to do right now, as opposed to sort of feeling that something is going to that there's a one correct path for your life. That just isn't the case.
Yeah, so don't like imagine there's like a perfect path. Actually, you're just like answering my next question, because like my next question is like, what advice would you give for undergraduate student who has a challenging time deciding what path to follow? But I feel like you already touched on that in the way that.
Yeah, so I think just jump into something to a degree. And if you really are, I think that if you are really at a point where it's hard to make the decision, if you're thinking about, say, two different majors and you really can't make up your mind, that's probably because they are really equally good choices for you. And sometimes that's just what it is, right? Think about it like sort of after a nice dinner, sometimes you're faced with the decision of what dessert to have, right? It's not really a right or a wrong answer, right? You just choose one and you're going to enjoy it either way.
So try one at a time.
Yeah, and also, I mean, there's decisions that you make in life aren't irreversible. There's lots of examples of people shifting their focus, sometimes dramatically, sometimes just a little bit, as they go on. So the decisions you make in undergrad, they're important and they will guide you for a little while, but it doesn't mean that the decision you make now locks you into some future, right? You can always, if you make a decision, if you find out that it wasn't working out for you, you have a long life ahead of you for which you can adjust things and change your focus.
So I guess getting started is the most important thing. So my last question would be in the multidisciplinary work between like biology, math, chemistry, physics, like all the scientific field, what would you say about like their connection, and what would you think this will help students to like think about how to border their major knowledge to other fields, like for people who are interested in like both computer science or maybe math?
So I think more and more, not just in my field of computational biology, it's a naturally interdisciplinary field, but these interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary sort of areas of study are arising all over the place. There's whole fields of computational social science, where the tools of math and computational science are used to tackle problems in sociology or in political science or in economics, right? There's interdisciplinary all over the place. And so, and for a lot of people, that can be an attractive thing. If you really are, if you're finding if you think it's hard to make a decision, right? At the point when I was young and in undergrad, I had interests in kind of math and the more physical sciences side of things. I had interests in biology. I didn't know how to bridge them. The field to bridge them didn't really exist very much at that point in time. It developed while I was developing in my career, and I was lucky for that. These fields exist now. This is a very, very rich time for people who have interests in seemingly very different fields to be able to bring them together. And there's lots of ways you can do that. If your interests are, say, in statistics, you really like statistics and you like working with numbers, but you want to, you also maybe have interests in social change and sort of social issues. There's lots of ways that you can bridge those by finding a career that does data analysis on those issues, for example, right? If you have interests in biology and in math, you can get fields like in mine. There's all of these examples of where you can bring together seemingly disparate interests into one. And so keep an eye out for those. And at the same time, for some people, multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity is something that's really attractive and interesting. It's also not for everybody. There's also plenty of people who are just really, really excited about a particular field. And there's nothing wrong with just digging deep into that field and to have more of a narrow focus, if that's where your interests lie.
Oh, yeah, that's really good to point out, like, not like everyone have to like narrow down their concentration. There is actually like increasing trends for us to like break up the link between like our major and what we want to work on, kind of. So that's my last question. So thank you so much for participating in our interview today.